Okay, so now we kind of got the context in place with the first sets of videos. So let us move into a little bit of practicality, and I'm going to add in what we could say the double awareness perspective, the alternate reality perspective to quite logical things that are happening inside the base program. And it has to do with not just physical energy, but also, of course, the density 1 energies of our reality field and what is left of the frequency energies, because even though that CERN and the quantum physicists have managed to create subdivisions of frequency energies and pushing up to 5%, we are 5% boronic matter. Originally, it was only 4%. There's 4%, and that's the first numbers they came out with. And then suddenly, when they found out the boronic matter and divided into 6 subparticles, then suddenly it was 5%. So they have probably added in more frequency energies into the timeline event network that rippled into our reality field after the timeline event. But keep recalling and keep in mind that the original outer domain, or what we call density 1, has nothing to do with dimension 1, 2, and 3. Well, you can say it has become quantum, atomic, molecular 1, 2, and 3 after the timeline event, but this is subsiding, and now we are having the original features that goes with the outer domain, and it is the 4th dimension with the possibility of integrating 5th and 6th dimensional features into the existing energy system so that we can shift out of the organic vessel and move back into the middle domain, where we continue our developmental journey as part of the density 2 realities, where again they have the version of the 4th as the lowest, but it's not the same 4th as the one in the outer domain, because the 4th dimension in the outer domain is connected to the abyss. So we're in the outer domain, we clear up what no longer has use for us. This is where we go when we need to do the turnaround. This is where we go when we need to change things that are difficult to change in density 2 because everything is so flexible. So we go to the outer domain where we can crystallize crystallize some molecular or particle organic form that we have better control of while we are administering the timelines in the density 2 without affecting the rest of the community. So we kind of go to ourselves as part of the rules of engagement, self-containment. If we are seeing that some of our energies, some parts of our energy system or our original light body is becoming dysfunctional to some degree, we travel to the outer domain to clear that and shed what is no longer needed into the abyss, where it will decompose and cease to exist entirely. That's how we do it. And I know how it sounds, but when you are traveling around in the holographic network, there has to be sectors where you can dispose of things that no longer have use, right? So if you kind of are in a holographic reality where all units are connected to the wholeness, you have to have a perimeter where you can go and push what is of no use for the entirety, the community you're part of, so that it harms no others. Hence the abyss. It is not something that's been invented. It is what we could say we run through the cycles, and there's always this residual type of energy of the energy usage that systems use. And we also have had, of course, systems that have destroyed themselves entirely, and they have also laid the ground for the creation of the abyss. And it's just kind of been there ever since. Whenever it started, nobody knows. Same as with the infinity field. When did that start? Nobody knows. So we kind of have that extreme polarity between the infinity field that is continuously ongoing and the abyss that's continuously ongoing. And I think it's important to understand, because when we talk about the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, or the Hebrew Bible, technically, Testament came in when Christianity took over. They call it the New and the Old Testament, right? As in kind of Christianity was the opposition to the Jewish religion. Anyways, just historical facts. But when we talk about the creational myth that is there, as well as part of the Sumerian, because the Jews stole it from Babylon, right? So when they were captured there, so they took that creational story and made it their own. But the matter of the fact is, it said that the Elohim took the matter from the chaos realms and create it and turn it into light. So it is possible to take all types of energies and create a new type of structure, which is what the Syrian vegan attempted to do in the Syrian system, which created the timeline event. So that was unfortunate. So we have learned after that the abyss is where you decompose things. It's not where you gain energy to slow down the flexibility rate of a holographic network. Instead, you kind of understand, yeah, that's a no-go. That's only to put things into, don't take things out of it. But of course, there are still some of the dark priesthoods and some of the dark forces that are tapping into the abyss to get renewed powers of what we could call the older type of the previous universal cycles, because it's there in the abyss, and some of it is quote unquote semi-viable, but it's not to be harnessed. And that's some of the issues when we talk about the transhuman agenda. They can harness there because it won't affect them. But that's what ties them to the dark collectives, because they are doing it. So it doesn't affect them, but it puts them into the affinity rate with the dark worlds and their connection to the abyss. So you can say from the abyss, a whole colony or hierarchy of different groups of being has risen up. And I know that because it's been a huge part of my releasing work as an attempt to try and restore some of the grids on our planet. But since that has not succeeded, then to clear it out of the original Pillar Project technologies and our insertion so that we can remove the new grand cycle technology. And as I always said, there are others working at the same level from the 6th dimension. So they are the ones that pull it out. I'm just cutting what ties it into this reality as one of the reasons why I came here in 1959. And again, I'm not supposed to be in this body because doing it in this body was never the plan. It would have been much more efficient if I had been in my own operating vessel. Then I probably would have been able to do it in snip, a couple of days, and then that was done, which is probably why they did what they did and got me captured and gave my original vessel to the carvers and placed me all over the fucking place so that my clearing work would be slow and tedious and only come into effect if the sun began its shutting down process, which it began 2007 when I got fully activated. And then it's been an activation process ever since, working with what I was supposed to do originally, but doing it in a physical form that is not engineered for it. So that's been a long process of adjusting my molecular state to be able to do this on a grand scale. So with that understanding, we're also saying, okay, so for those of you who are not in this deeper political mess of the ancient races as I am, you are doing your transition in a manner where I'm supposed to give you some good advice on how to do that. So that's where we will go to now, because we are having, those of us of the ancient races, as I talked about, we have our own specificities, we have our own professions, and although we are having amongst the grays and the lesser races, we have hive minds, we have more than one that is connected to cube and that is administering the different properties of that feature. In the original worlds, only one is one is the stakeholder or the care taker or the keeper or the custodian. You choose yourself for a specific task, which in the machine worlds have been divided into different groups of grays, maintainers or caretakers, keepers of the networks, as well as the custodians of the different groups and races that are there incoming and going, as in kind of the what do you call it? The janitors of the system, so to speak. Anyway, so that's under the cube technology. And if you take out the cubes, you take out these grays and they will cease to exist, so to speak, in the 4th dimension, because even though they are physical per se in the 4th dimension, in 4th dimensional energies, they will be tangible. They are more energetically, holographically engineered than we are here in the outer domain. Here in the outer domain, we can remove the holographic light body system. That's the energy configuration. That can be removed, but the body will still continue because it's a clone vessel engineered to be able to work and thrive from the energies of the enclosure. So that's what the physical form is created for. And that's our problem when we talk about the interconnectedness with the base program. So as long as we are in this physical form, we are building in the possibility of the fifth dimension and the possibility of the sixth dimension that will tie us back into the middle domain on its correct level. Not the fourth dimension. That's always the lowest level where we have organic vessels. So if we do manage to get ourselves transferred via the gate systems back into the middle domain and take on an energy system configuration in the fifth, and then what we call the consciousness potentials in the sixth, then we will automatically recreate a fourth dimensional organic vessel that is suitable for the middle domain. Okay, so therefore the lowest level is always the organic level. And that here on our planet, it is the opposite. It is the quote unquote, the third dimension that is the organic, whereas the second and the first are tied into the networks in a reconstructed way, which renders us with a very slow band of energies to exist within, which is why we say in the third dimension, we both have the biocodes and we also have the emotional field and we have the mental field, which exhausts the third dimension quite extensively. And these features are created of the timeline event energy, so we only got 4% left. And that's important to understand. So that's one of the reasons when we talk electricity and when we talk food, that we are, as a global community, due to the insectoid incoming, overproducing organic vessels using the clone technology to produce what they needed to have a vessel inside this reality, has overused what this reality field can carry. And we are now seeing the effects of that. Although it is cloaked within what we call political decision making, that appears to have a reason within something that is done by one of the others in our segmented, separatistic worldview. And let me put it into context. In 2019, we had the thing that came from China, and it was all about the Chinese, and that led to the whole situation where we learned social distancing, we learned how to wash our hands, and we learned to keep a distance from other people, so that we would not get into their shedding off rate of what they had of ailments. I'm putting it deliberately in that way because already back in 2016 and until 2019, I was trained in understanding that when I touched something, I left an energetic imprint, so I needed to learn to clear my imprint. When I was around other things, sitting on benches, sitting in chairs, sitting in buses, wherever I went, my field would leave an imprint that would linger on for a period of time, where others could walk through it and by that imprint would get their code systems connected to mine. So being out in public suddenly became a bit of a hassle, because what they then had in their fields, if they sat on where I had been positioned in the train, for instance, their field would then merge with mine, and then I would suddenly get things into my perception field that wasn't there to begin with, just because I had taken a seat in the train. And until the cube technology were in place that was supposed to engineer and secure that this did not happen, I had to do it on my own. And that's where I really got the kick off into seeing insectoid energy to a large degree, because there I understood that the fourth dimension were already incoming into our reality. And by that, I had to learn new ways of being human, including also had to learn that it was a good idea to keep at least a meter between me and another person, because otherwise I would get entangled into their field. These are fourth dimensional features that are part of our reality. They are, of course, now controlling it by inserted technology such as drones that are clearing the ones that are having what we could say a dangerous potential for those of us who have been selected to continue and do the transition. And let me explain what that means. I was out walking the other day, and normally I am dealing with whatever comes into my field, similar with the insectoids, as in the bugs that are crawling into my home, they come my way because they're ready to be released from their physical form. It does not kill the physical form. With bugs, of course, yes, because I'm doing it for them. But with humans, no, of course not. I'm not a killer, right? So therefore, but when people come to me, what is in them then present itself, and I can then remove it. It does not harm the human. On the contrary, actually relieves them of some of the things that are in them. They don't know why, but suddenly their life becomes easier until they are around another person which has the similar kind of bug, which then jump to them because they have not cleared out their regressed genetics. But the bugs that are ready to go, they come my way, and they steer their human into my path when I'm out walking. And I'm not doing that a lot, but I used to until I discovered that going out and being in nature, which I used to enjoy, was not really something that was enjoyable anymore, because I was just working. Whatever came my way were more nasty than the other thing that had to be released. And sometimes I had to struggle with it for a period of time until I learned how to deformulate them, as in decomposing their holographic imprint, and by that get their genetics and get the cubes and get their insertions in the book of life and get their original body in stasis and delete that one and disconnect them from the elemental and the racial grids or the technologies that they were connected to, either as a craft or as part of the original pillar project. So until I learned that mechanism, it was a little bit of a hassle for me, kind of, yeah, not really worth it. It's all about this. You come to the point where kind of, yeah, is it even worth it, right? Why even do it when it takes hours and days and whatever, where you're in sheer agony? Yeah, not really worth walking out for a little bit of sunshine, is it? In a sun that's dying anyways, and is now only producing chaos energy, which I'll return to a little bit later as well. So what's the point, right? Might as well just stay indoors. And fortunately, well, in my old apartment, that did not go well, because then I was there all the time, and that had a huge impact on the people around me, which then became the carriers of the ones that wanted to be released. So that was not a good solution. And now I'm here in this new little house with 2 floors, where I have the ground floor out to the normal world, and I have the top floor or the first floor as in kind of in the 5th dimension, where I'm a little bit on my own. So I can choose if I want to go down and go out, I can do that, but I can level up and down, which is kind of nice because it gives a circulation of energy. Whereas if you're on the same level, you're on the horizontal level all the time, not the ability to go vertically. And even my house number shows that I have the 4th and the 5th because I live in number 45. In the old apartment, I was living in number 4. Interesting enough, right? So here everything fits together when you begin to live with the double awareness. There are no circumstantial incidents that are put your way by some weird freak lines of, I would call it accidents, but it's incidents that kind of fall. I forgot the word. You know what I mean? Nothing is random, right? Not when you're part of the otherworldly races and their projects here. Then everything is engineered for you to teach you something, to teach you how to operate in the different types of energies. And that's what the custodians are doing from the different groups of either the parallel versions of our reality, the Gaians, or as part of the parallel universal matrix in America, or as part of what do you call it? I'm thinking about something because actually yesterday in the whole project news sign up that I have running here for the remains of 2022, I put up a video or a podcast about some of the changes of the sun, as well as some of the Gaians and some of the information I got there. But there's also information that's not really relevant for this course material. But I would put it in anyways, I think, after this video, or because it was made yesterday, will probably come prior to this video, and that's why I'm being a little bit reluctant with it. So let's see if I can catch up with the information as it's supposed to in its context. But it was technically in the context yesterday of some of the information that needed to be given to some of the members within the Changemaker News Group. So therefore, again, when we talk about the different levels of information that is relevant for all of us, it is perhaps not relevant within this context. So it will be put in later on with the Gaians, the parallel structures, the different races, but I might put it in as well. Let's see how things play out as I move further into this one, because it is a piece of the puzzle of the information I'm giving today, because it's all part of the sequence. And that was connected to the solar flares and the particle burst that our sun is giving off, which is also going to have a huge impact on our use on electricity as well as on our magnetic field. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. And into that does the new type of custodians, which are the Gaians from the parallel universal structure, not the parallel universal matrix, but a parallel universal structure. That is one of the original 12 universes that we are a part of, that has their 1-7 pillar intact. Sorry about that. They have their 1-7 pillar intact, and therefore they can impact us with that type of energy in density 1. And these are the Gaians. They are not spelled G-A-I-A, but G-A-Y-A. And I've talked about them. They are the progenitors of the Y chromosome as it was seeded into this reality field, so that the D13 collective could have male forms or humanoid forms here as well. So they are the seeders of that one, the custodians of the Y chromosome. And they're trying to reinsert a new type of Y chromosome, a white version from their parallel universal structure, so that the males on our planet that are going to do the transition will have a fair chance. Because if they don't, they will always be anchored into the abyss, because the Y chromosome in our 1-7 pillar were hit severely by the timeline event. And everything since has been an attempt to try and restore that. And everything since then have failed. So therefore they have come in, and they are a semi-android race. I talked about them before, but they're semi-android because here in our reality, they need to be semi-android. They are in the middle domain. They need to be semi-android, and they need to be semi-android because once they cross the barrier between the parallel universal structures of the original 12 universes, of which each universe has its own 12 universal lineages, of which each has its own developmental processes within a different versions of the Pillar Project. Very important to understand. So they have their version of it, and we have our version of it. And therefore, they have chosen to come and assist, quote unquote, because the loss of around 60% of the male population would be the end result if not something happened with a sort of infusion into selected males that would undergo a quite harsh transitioning process with the new Y chromosome. Okay, I'm giving the information here apparently. So what will be happening is that these men will be wiped entirely of their energy system that's connected to the Y chromosome. A new feature would be instated instead. And then they would undergo a pretty harsh learning program where they learn not to do the mistakes that will tie them back into the current type of programming that's linked to the current type of Y chromosome. This is going to be enormously unpleasant. I'm going to put it that way because my upgrading sequences have been enormously unpleasant. And I have been under these Gaian races for quite some time. In 2016, these are the ones that I call the 7Ds. I know I also play with the dark technology of our original 1-7 pillar, and I also call that the 7Ds. But there I call it the 7Ds because it's denial, depression, all of these dark features, as you know, it's technology cubes. I call that because the Pillar Project in 1-7 pillar is upheld by different types of cubes. And our seventh dimensional creatures here, so to speak, of that race, not creatures, but that race, used to be a position in the Arcturian system. And that's why the Arcturians have been trying so hard to do what they need to do, but they can't. So now we are calling in the brothers from the other side. And I'm saying brothers because they are males. There are no females in this race. The Gaians are only humanoids. They do not have female consciousness. because they are the first rays that came from the D13 collective and seeded in the D13 collective energies into this universal structure that is under the overseeing and the high councils of the D14 collective that focus on consciousness. So they were part of seeding in that energy that allowed for the physical forms in the outer domain of the D13 collective so they could clear their flawed genetics from some of the primes of our D13 collective. They have their version of the D13 collective that did not carry the flaw in the genetic makeup of the D13 collective. So this is why they're doing that swap. And that's what was in the video in the project, whole project news that I wanted to put in here, as with that video. But here I got a little bit of more extended explanation of it. So we'll keep it there. So that's what is going to happen with males. And if that happens, then that will ripple in to make it easier for females to clear out their distorted X chromosome and lift us into the non-distorted version of our X chromosome. We have the one that's behind and the one that's in front, as you learned in the path cutter material, as well as in the template science course material 3. Then it will be easier for us to restore our energy system and by that give a huge boost for humanity. But with the Gaians coming in, that means that they must come in, and as they do that, they cannot come in their original vessels because they belong to the alternate universal structure, not the parallel universal matrix. That's the regress races. It belongs to the Americans. That's what they're doing there. So we're talking here in Europe. So it's not going to happen in America because the Gaians are not welcome there. In America, the parallel universal matrix are doing their blend and their version of the same technology with the males over there to blend with their alternates in the parallel universal matrix that will then take over the human population in America, do what they need to do, and then pull out. And then America will fall tremendously in energy and consciousness once that's done within the next 5 to 10 years. And then perhaps Europe will go in and assist America. And that will most likely be seen as the complete collapse of America, the American economy, and all of what's going on in America. And there is a possibility that they will then look to Europe for assistance, as Europe has often looked to America for assistance. So it will be the other way around. And if that happens, then the races that are now operating in Europe to try and figure out ways to live around the lack of energy in our reality field and upholding it via host technology and the new incoming parallel structural alternate reality technologies from other parallel universal structures, not matrices, but structures of the original kind, to uphold our density 1 so that we can do the transition and not be sucked into the abyss. Because that's what's happening now. The sun has shut down and is now shedding off distortion energy. The particle bursts that are coming from the sun are no longer creating structure as they used to with the density 2 energies. They are now doing the opposite. The sun is bursting off huge particle bursts that are shedding off enormous amount of distortion, chaos, entropy, energy into our planetary system. And that affects our magnetic field. And that was also some of the things I talked about in the news. But we will touch ground with it here in a different way. So as I first thought I was going to do it that way, I here got the same explanations here, but I will use these explanations in a more broader context so you get the real picture of it, not just as a news. Yes, we had here on September 5th, 6th, and 7th, and here rippling into the 8th with erratic weather, storm, and thunderstorms that are going to come later today. We were hit by that particle burst of the sun happening on September 5th, late on September 5th. And then it rippled into our reality field on September 6th, where it hit the ionosphere, which those of us who are connected to the ionosphere via our mental field would feel that. I did that. Some of the information I'd given were a little bit erratic, and now I know why. I thought it was because I was attacked by creatures, but actually it was because our magnetic field were hit, which hit the ionosphere, which hit the mental field, and that's the neural network in humans. Then on September 7th, it rippled into, the other way around. September 6th hit the technology. Sorry about that. I had to recharge my batteries on my computers and on my iPhones all the time. And it was kind of, they were being discharged, so to speak. They lost their battery momentum all the time because of the subtle M-class flares that had come, even though the science says the particle bursts were X class. The M class, the blue light, had the effect on our computers and our technology. And even though it is an X class, it's the M class that affects our electronics. And then on the 7th, that was yesterday, it hit the neural network, but it also rippled in earlier than that, which I felt, of course, being disorganized, having that slightly chaotic, or scattered sense in my mind that made it difficult for me to gather my thoughts and forget things, not because of being wiped, but because of the solar flare. So that's going to be an impact as well. And then now today on the 8th, it is really hitting our reality field with severe storms. And later on, we're going to have a thunderstorm where all of the ions are going to be discharged into our reality field. And that, not that it's going to crash down the infrastructure or anything, but this is in play as well. So there are two factors that are playing in. Plus we're having, when we began with what are the physical explanations for these events. We had the incoming thing from 2019 from China, but the matter of the fact was, and that's where I was talking before, I will return to the solar flares as well as the Gaians later on. But what was important to understand here to begin with is that we will get outer explanations that are as the last result of a long series of energetic events. And already back in 2016, as I said, and 17 and 18 and 19, I learned the hard way: isolation, self-isolation, self-containment, being aware of my imprints, my holographic imprints. As I activated my high order energy system, I was capable of leaving imprints that would affect my energy system because it would be lingering on for a while. People would walk through it. People leave their imprints around. People normally don't think about it. Suddenly they are in the city or they're walking around a lot of people and they don't understand why they're suddenly thinking things that they normally don't think about. That's because they get the imprints of other people. And that's completely normal in the fourth dimension. And that's why we learn the rules of engagement, of self-containment. If your energy system is not pure enough to be amongst others, you are not around others because you imprint on them. You leave an imprint wherever you go and wherever you are. And if you're talking to someone else, you will leave that imprint too. And the insectoids, they use that to get us all to a lot of sexual activity. That's the heavy imprinting where you merge fields and everything can jump from one to another, especially males being used for that one via the Y chromosome to contaminate the females and prep them to be able to bear insectoid children. And then we have the whole hugging thing, so that females that had already had a high level of insectoid or parasitic entities, they would run around being all of these caring, spiritual huggers, you know them, slightly obese, slightly disgusting, but very kind, and hugger, all of this. And then they would hug each other. And then suddenly we had the whole lockdown and nobody was hugging anybody. And then we suddenly had the whole flesh hunger kind of thing, that people were starving because they were not being hugged enough, because there was not enough parasitic exchange. So that's part of what they're trying to shut down, the insectoid jumpers and shedding and all of the things that's been going on. And that has then been put into rule book of why we need to do this and that. And it created a kind of a huge scream around the planet, because all of the parasites were then hungry for food of others. All of this hugging, all of this exchange of energy was suddenly taken away from them. And instead then, what did they then have? Then had the entertainment, which would come in different forms of streaming services, such as Netflix, that were owned by underworld forces. And then it was shifted into something else. You can do the math. So nothing is random inside this reality. So as change makers, we understand that completely, not because we're paranoid and have the aluminum hats on or we're conspiracy theorists or whatever's going on. We know this energetically. And therefore, when we're now talking about when the sun shut down in March 22 completely, I was just waiting, okay, what will that mean? Because I had already from 2020, 21 and the beginning of 22 until I lifted out of the fourth cycle and just said, yeah, that's it. I'm out of that one. I constantly had drones coming in telling me you are overusing, and therefore you will come under punishment. You know the 3-step transgression rate, or you might not know because it's part of the new reality programs, which is explained there. But in the old world order program, you would get the warning, and if you didn't follow that one, you would come under the enslavement programs, and if you're there, continue to transgress, you would put under the imprisonment program. And if you continue, you would be pushed into the abyss, or the underworld to begin with. So that's kind of how that was. And the rules were, of course, they're under the Dracos and what the Dracos felt were their right to do. And that's the reincarnational cycle. That's the the enslavement system. Because nobody out here in the outer domain were ever supposed to return to the middle domain. Once they got here, this was where everything was deposited. This is where things were thrown in, dropped. It's a drop zone where the other races try to get rid of the high energy consuming, high genetic, parasitic entities, whatever they were developing their own systems. They threw them in here and put them into the clone bodies, which is also why our reality looks as it does. That's why we have all of this perversion and predatorious behavior that is now sparking to life because we're getting the fourth dimension in. So the issues they had in the other domains are now coming into our domain and is becoming visible. So that's one of the other reasons why people are running amok out there in the world as we know of it. And that was one of the reasons why NOAA decided to not be part of America and pushed their sub-oceanic stations in what we call the Atlantean or the Atlantic, far away from America, and they have now decided to join the European future human communities and are now shifting away from America until further notice and are joining our groups here to transform their human projects, of which some are in America, but mostly they will eventually transfer these souls from America and to what we call a European counter that they are engineering, because they know how to engineer physical vessels as well. So they will do the rebirth here instead and then become part of the European progression sciences, as well as the dynamics that will ensure that the portions of Europe or Eurasia, which is technically the continent we are on, will continue to exist. That's the plan of the future. The future communities of our world will have Arctis, and then will go down to portions of Eurasia, and the rest of the planet will cease to exist. The land masses will go down under in the deep waters that are now at that point in time unlivable habitats that are consuming the land masses with whatever it is due to the lack of the sun, and therefore the ocean will change its features. But every type of technology will be accommodated at that time. But of course, all the things that are going on now is trying to prevent that, because the enhanced humans, or what we call the new version of the bloodlines, the ones that have come back from the future, they already lived with the old type of the NOAA program as well as with the old type of the enhanced human programs. And they went off planet to the Arcturian system, as you know, and they went off planet to Mars and other places. And they failed the mission there. They did not complete what they needed to complete. So hence they had been forced to come back and do it all over again, which is why it's a little bit there. I talk about that in the whole philosophy book, the solar system nations. They are reliving what they were doing before, but they are now doing it in what we call the 2.0 and 3.0 versions, where they are upgrading humans to be able to withstand and deal with what we call the parallel universal structures and their genomes. because when you enter into parallel universal structure, that is a parallel or an alternate version of our universal structure. They will be the primes there, and where we will be the alternates. And if an alternate enters into another parallel structure, then the alternate must accommodate itself to the universal structure. It's part of the configuration. It must take on the configuration of the world it wants to become part of. And hence, since the consciousness units of the other 12 universal structures are different, their configurations are different than ours, they must adjust to our type of configuration, and that affects the organic vessels as well as the energy system. And then these consciousness units will then deconfigure itself. It will align itself with the template configuration or architecture of this system, and with that lose portions of their knowledge. So that's the problem. And that's why the Gaians are using android forms, so they can preserve their original structure and features of their own universal structure. Sorry about that. I'm trying very hard to avoid the word matrix so you don't get confused with the parallel universal matrix and the parallel universal structures of the original 12 universal universes that were the cycles, the universal cycles. And it also becomes complicated because when I say universe, you think like a universe like this one, but what you're seeing is an artificial construction. It's not the universe we are part of. A universe is a holographic, dynamic field of fields within fields, of networks within networks, of lattice patterns within patterns, of different forms of energies within energies. It has no structure as you know of it. It is not what you look at when you look out in space. It has no space. Space is a timeline event feature as we know of it. It has no electromagnetic energy. It has no suns. It has no stars. It has no galaxies. It has nothing what we know of, but it has different patterns that are nodal points in the overall holographic network that can manifest into galaxies in our system. That's the timeline event version of the galactic pattern that is the inner domains. That are the inner domains. So this is what, that's why I'm kind of struggling with the language here, because it gets more and more complicated when we leave this reality program and get into the original worlds where you stop having language for things. That's why everybody becomes telepathic, because the only thing you can convey the information is either as codes or as visuals. And I can't speak visual, so I have to speak as I can with the language that is possible for me to share with you, but it becomes more and more complex and more difficult, which is why most races then turn into what we call simple language, which the Greys are using here as well, where a triangle means the Trinity system that runs on 3 types of dimensions that are interacting together within a sphere of the 4th dimension. You have the pentagram version that shows the 5th dimensional as a feature, but it does not go with the physical form. That's one of them, one version of the interpretation, but mainly it goes with 5 levels of consciousness that goes into the understanding of true knowledge and sciences that works within 5 dimensions within the 5th cycle, etc., etc. So therefore, when I'm sorry about being a little bit annoyed about this, but I'm kind of struggling with finding the words as I get up into the 5th dimension, and there it will be impossible for me to teach you anything. You will have to learn it yourself. So this is where eventually my path will end of what I can share, because it becomes nonverbal. And if you are working with me in a session, I can then imprint the image in your mind, and then you will be able to see it, and then it will be easier for you to understand what I'm talking about. But I can't do it here in class material, so that's also why I'm just blasting through these things. And then I know once that's done, then it's done doing teaching material. The whole academy has an expiration date as well. Once I'm done with the pioneer work, there will be no further classes, because then you are and should be on your own behalf in the 5th dimension. And technically, you don't need me anymore anyways. It's beyond the whole academy. You're on your own then, and you don't need anything than what I can give. So what I'm doing here is on the behalf of the 7Ds, teaching you in the human language as much as I can to get you out of the base program. That's the progression work, check. Get you through the changemaker understanding to live within what we call the fourth dimensional features and arrange your life accordingly, which we're doing now, check. And then give you the fifth dimensional sciences to the degree that is possible to put into the new reality program course material, as well as some of the science papers I will come up with later on. And then that's it. Then you're on your own with what you have got. So that's also one of the things that will happen. And then I will focus on the challenges, the psychological challenges in the whole advanced psychotherapy. So that's the plan for me, how I'm going to do the next 13 years once I'm done with the work here in the whole Changemaker project, or the whole project Changemaker, done here in 2022. It's always been limited to that. Okay, so there are larger things at play here. So what you need to take away from this one here in this video, we'll continue in the next one, is that everything that happens inside the base program now have energetic forerunners. It has already inbuilt patterns that are existing in the fourth dimension already. And as change makers, you are to get the information while it's still being built as a pattern in the fourth dimension. So you can prepare for the changes that will come inside the physical reality of the base program, although we don't really know how they're going to play out, but we know that they will come, and we will already have adjusted to it, so that when it does hit the generic population, we will have no effect of it because we have already arranged ourselves accordingly to the information that we got years before. And that's why we'll continue in the next video. Thank you.